I am 30 years old, a financial analyst living in Manhattan. I grew up in Chicago, raised by a mother who taught me that discipline and loyalty build everything worth keeping. My life has always been about structure, progress, and quiet dedication. 2 years ago, I met Maya, a 28-year-old marketing consultant from San Diego who described herself as a free spirit. She was magnetic, unpredictable, and full of energy. Where I saw comfort in routine, she saw confinement. Where I found meaning in building a future, she found joy in chasing moments. I thought our differences would balance each other. I thought love could be enough to bridge the distance between chaos and order. We met at a birthday party in Brooklyn. She was the kind of woman who turned heads without trying. I still remember the first thing she said to me, asking if I ever got tired of analyzing numbers instead of people. I laughed, and somehow that moment stretched into 2 years of shared memories. She taught me how to loosen up, and I taught her how to slow down. At least that is what I believed. In the beginning, we were inseparable. We spent weekends exploring small towns upstate, cooking together, and falling asleep on the couch watching old movies. She loved that I listened, that I remembered the small details she mentioned in passing. When she had a rough week at work, I brought flowers. When she wanted to quit her job, I told her she could stay with me until she figured things out. She said I was dependable, the kind of man women could trust. I thought that meant something good. But slowly, things began to change. Every time I mentioned the future, her tone would shift. When I suggested moving in together, she laughed and said it was too soon. When I mentioned investing together, she called me boring. When I talked about stability, she told me I thought too much like a husband and not enough like a boyfriend. I thought she was teasing. Now I know she was warning me. Even with the warning signs, I stayed. I kept believing that love was supposed to require patience. I convinced myself that if I kept showing up, she would eventually meet me halfway. I helped her through a job loss, supported her ideas, and paid for most of what we did together without keeping score. She called me safe, steady, grounded. I didn't realize those were just her polite ways of saying she wanted something else. When our 2-year anniversary came, I wanted to remind her of why we started. I reserved a rooftop restaurant overlooking the Hudson River, a place she once said she dreamed of visiting. The air was crisp, the skyline glowing like something out of a movie. I wore a navy suit, brought her favorite flowers, and carried a small velvet box with a silver bracelet engraved with our initials. I thought that night would be a promise of commitment. I believed she was finally ready. She arrived late, as always, but radiant. Her dress caught the light with every step. She kissed me on the cheek and said she had a surprise for me. I smiled, ready to hear anything. Halfway through dinner, while the band played soft jazz, she leaned across the table and spoke the words that froze time. "Keep it casual, you're not husband material." For a moment, I thought she was joking. I waited for the laughter that usually followed her reckless sentences, but it never came. She said it lightly, sipping her champagne as if it was just another conversation about the weather. She explained that I was wonderful, kind, even rare, but not the kind of man who made her feel alive. She wanted freedom, not promises. She wanted something that moved faster, something she could leave without guilt. She said she did not want to hurt me, but I could hear how certain she was. I stared at her, unable to find words. Around us, other couples were laughing, glasses clinking, music filling the air. The contrast felt cruel. I realized in that moment that everything I had been building had existed only in my mind. To her, it had always been temporary. I sat back in my chair, feeling the weight of understanding settle in. I smiled, not because I was calm, but because I finally saw things clearly. I walked away without looking back. The cold air hit my face as soon as I stepped outside. It felt sharp but cleansing, like a final goodbye to the man who had tried too hard to be enough for someone who never wanted to stay. That night, as the noise of the city echoed around me, I realized that silence can be the loudest kind of freedom. I folded my napkin and placed it gently on the table. The restaurant lights shimmered against the glass windows, framing the skyline like a photograph. Maya looked at me with that same half-smile she always used when she thought she had said something clever. Behind her, the city glowed gold and silver, full of people falling in and out of love, unaware that one table above the Hudson River had just witnessed the quiet death of a relationship. I stood slowly, feeling the weight of the moment settle into my chest. She tilted her head, her tone suddenly defensive, asking me not to take everything so seriously. I said nothing. Silence felt like the only language that still made sense. I left the unopened bracelet box next to her glass, the silver ribbon catching the light as I walked away. I could feel her eyes on my back, waiting for me to turn around and laugh, to act like this was just another one of our small fights. But I didn't. The elevator doors closed, and in that instant, something inside me reset. When I stepped outside, the wind hit my face hard. It was sharp, clean, and real. My phone started buzzing immediately, her name flashing again and again. I ignored it. The messages came one after another. Some were soft, asking me to come back so we could talk. Others were sharp, accusing me of overreacting. Then came the voice messages, her voice cracking between anger and guilt. I kept walking through the Manhattan streets, my hands in my pockets, the night cold enough to sting but not enough to stop me. By the time I reached the parking lot, my decision was made. I drove straight to her apartment, the same one where I'd spent countless weekends fixing broken shelves, cooking dinner, and pretending her commitment issues were just fear. The place was dark when I arrived. I let myself in quietly with the key she had given me months ago. The walls looked emptier than usual, even though nothing had changed. Her shoes were lined by the door, her jacket hanging where it always did, but it all felt foreign now. I walked into the bedroom, opened the drawer where I kept my things, and started packing. My toothbrush, my razor, the hoodie she always borrowed because it smelled like me. I picked up the coffee mug we bought together in Miami, the one with matching initials, and wrapped it in an old t-shirt before sliding into the bag. Every small item felt heavier than it should have. I paused for a second, looking around the room, and realized that no matter how many memories we built here, none of them belonged to both of us. Outside, the city hummed with life, while mine felt like it had gone completely silent. I sent one short text before leaving. Nothing emotional, just a single line telling her I had taken my things and she did not have to call again. Then I turned my phone off, started the car, and drove toward Brooklyn. The bridges looked endless in the distance, their lights reflecting on the water like scattered promises. I reached my brother's place around midnight. He opened the door, confused by the sight of me, standing there with a duffel bag and no words. I told him I needed a couch for a while. He nodded without asking questions. That night, I lay on the couch staring at the ceiling, listening to the faint sounds of traffic outside. It was the first time in years that my mind wasn't racing to fix something. I felt empty, but it was the kind of emptiness that feels like peace. I slept deeply, like a man who had finally stopped negotiating his worth. In the morning, sunlight streamed through the blinds. I turned my phone back on. Dozens of messages waited for me. She had written long paragraphs, switching between apologies and accusations. One of them said I was being cruel. Another said she had just been honest. And there was one short message that made me laugh under my breath. It said, "Freedom looks good on me." That was all I needed to see. I put the phone face down and poured myself a cup of coffee from my brother's kitchen. The smell filled the room, grounding me in the quiet. Outside, the city moved on, indifferent to everything that had happened. I opened my laptop and checked my work emails like it was any other morning. There was something satisfying about that normalcy. It reminded me that my life still existed outside of her. Every streetlight, every sound, every person rushing to work reminded me that endings don't stop the world from spinning. They just make room for clarity. Later that day, my brother handed me an extra key and told me to stay as long as I needed. I thanked him and spent the afternoon unpacking what little I had brought. My phone buzzed again, but I didn't reach for it. I knew exactly what the messages would say. Apologies disguised as explanations. Promises she wouldn't keep. I let it ring. That night, I went for a walk through the neighborhood. The streets were quiet, the air cool and clean. For the first time, I didn't feel like I had lost something. I felt like I had escaped. Somewhere between the noise of the city and the stillness of my thoughts, I realized the truth I had ignored for too long. Sometimes, closure isn't something you get from another person. It's the sound of your own footsteps walking away. Over the next week, she called more than 20 times. Each ring felt like a ghost, trying to drag me back into a life I had already left behind. I never picked up. The silence became my boundary, my revenge without noise. Then the messages started arriving, long paragraphs mixed with nostalgia and anger. She asked if we could talk, accused me of being dramatic, then softened her tone, saying she only wanted to understand. I did not respond. When that failed, she sent our mutual friends to reach me. They said she was heartbroken and confused, that she only wanted closure. I told them she did not miss me. She missed control. That sentence seemed to travel fast because she stopped trying to reach me directly after that. The peace that followed was almost addictive. I began cleaning my life like a house after a storm. I canceled our shared gym membership, the one she had promised to use more often but never did. I withdrew my share from a vacation fund we had started and redirected the money to something better. My mother's 60th birthday was approaching, and she had never been to Florida. I booked her a surprise weekend trip, full hotel package, beach view, everything she had once dreamed of. When Maya found out, she called it petty. I called it poetic. I started rebuilding my routines piece by piece. Morning runs in the park replaced long phone calls filled with excuses. Evenings once spent waiting for her messages turned into quiet study sessions as I signed up for night classes in real estate investment. My apartment in Brooklyn was temporary, but I decided to make it feel permanent. I bought a small desk, hung art on the walls, and replaced my phone wallpaper with a sunrise picture I had taken myself. For the first time in years, my life no longer needed someone else's presence to feel complete. A month later, a friend sent me a screenshot of her new boyfriend. He was an influencer with a large following, famous for travel photos and motivational quotes. His bio read, "Live free." It made sense. She had replaced me with a mirror of everything she claimed to want. I smiled, not out of bitterness, but recognition. She had not changed, and I finally accepted that she never would. 3 weeks after that, she began posting cryptic quotes on her social media. Phrases about fake people, emotional growth, and lessons learned. People commented supportively, unaware that half of those words were directed at me. I scrolled once and closed the app. My world no longer revolved around proving her wrong. With each small decision, I created distance. I bought my own apartment in Jersey City, nothing fancy, but mine entirely. I painted the walls myself, furnished it one piece at a time, and filled it only with things that felt peaceful. Every new purchase felt like reclaiming a part of me she had drained. When I looked out the window at night and saw the skyline glowing across the river, I felt something I had not felt in a long time. Stability. I stopped measuring success by who noticed it. The only validation I wanted was waking up without anxiety. My job was steady, my savings growing, and my confidence slowly rebuilt itself. Sometimes I would think about how close I came to marrying someone who saw me as an option. That thought always ended with a quiet sense of gratitude. She had taught me what I did not need. I did not need someone who confused comfort with boredom. I did not need someone who called loyalty predictable or mocked kindness as weakness. What I needed was peace, focus, and purpose. Every late night study session, every jog through the early morning fog, every quiet dinner alone reminded me that losing her was not a tragedy. It was freedom wearing a disguise. 6 months later, I sat on my balcony with a cup of coffee warming my hands as the first rays of light painted the Manhattan skyline gold. The air was cold, the kind that made you feel awake in every sense of the word. Life had changed quietly, but completely. I had earned a promotion at work, one that came after months of steady focus and long nights. My days were full, but peaceful. The gym had become my therapy, my evenings spent training instead of overthinking. My apartment finally felt like home, not a temporary shelter from heartbreak, but a space that reflected who I had become. The past no longer chased me, yet sometimes it brushed against my thoughts like a shadow I could still recognize. That morning, as I scrolled through my phone, I saw her name again for the first time in months. A friend had tagged me in an old photo, and there she was in the comments, pretending not to see me. Later that afternoon, curiosity led me to check her profile. The post told their own story. The influencer boyfriend was gone, his pictures deleted, his name erased. A few cryptic captions spoke about lessons and growth, the usual words people use when they try to turn regret into wisdom. People had told me she was heartbroken after he left, that he had told her he was not ready for commitment. The irony was sharp but oddly peaceful. I felt nothing cruel toward her, just the quiet understanding that everything she ran from had finally found her. She had wanted freedom. Now she was living in it alone. Last week, she finally texted me. The message was short. "You always knew what you wanted." I respect that now. I read it twice, not out of nostalgia, but disbelief that the person who once dismissed my steadiness now admired it. I typed back a simple line. "Glad you finally do." Then I deleted her number for good. It was not anger. It was closure written without bitterness. The following morning, I met my mother for brunch in Central Park. She had flown in from Chicago to visit me. When she saw me, she smiled with that quiet pride only mothers have when they sense their child has healed. Over pancakes and coffee, she asked if I had forgiven Maya. I told her forgiveness was not about the other person. It was about reclaiming peace. She nodded and said she was proud of me for learning that younger than most men do. After she left, I walked through the park alone. The trees had begun to bloom again, the same way life always does after a hard winter. I thought about how different everything felt. I used to believe love meant fighting to stay. Now I understood it also means knowing when to walk away. I no longer needed to prove that I was good enough to keep. Being solid in a world addicted to temporary things had become my quiet rebellion. In the months that followed, opportunities began to unfold naturally. My boss trusted me with larger projects, my investments started growing, and I launched a small side venture in real estate, something I had studied for months in silence. I met new people, not because I was searching for someone, but because I was no longer hiding from myself. Conversations felt lighter. Smiles felt genuine. I had stopped performing the role of a man waiting for validation and started living as one who already had it within him. Sometimes at night, I sat by the window with a notebook, writing thoughts about everything I had learned. How people often mistake consistency for boredom. How loyalty is undervalued until it is gone. How calmness can be more powerful than chaos. I no longer resented the heartbreak. It had been a brutal teacher, but a necessary one. 6 months ago, I was a man chasing approval. Now I was a man standing still and unbothered while the world spun around me. The city outside my window looked the same, yet it no longer intimidated me. It mirrored me instead, steady beneath the surface, full of motion and purpose. Being told I was not husband material had once felt like an insult. Now it sounded like a compliment in disguise. She had meant I was too grounded, too sure, too stable for her world of temporary highs. But that was exactly what I wanted to be. Solid, real, consistent. In a city where everyone rushes to fill the silence, I found strength in mine. I stopped trying to fit into someone else's temporary chapter and started writing my own. Each sunrise on that balcony reminded me of a simple truth. You do not need to be the kind of man someone wants to keep for a season. You only need to be the kind who can build a life worth keeping forever.